Hello everyone, this is DanielGamerDX here, and welcome to another installment of Hedgehog Month. Today we'll be taking a look at a pretty important character in the Sonic franchise, I feel, none other than Amy Rose. Last year I did a deep dive into who I think Shadow the Hedgehog is as a character. That nobody watched, but that's besides the point. And I thought I'd take a crack at another character deep dive. And this time with none other than Rosie the Rascal herself. The debates surrounding this character have matched, if not surpassed, the level of intensity as the ones with old Edgy the Hedgie. And I'd like to throw my own 2 cents out there. Like my Shadow the Hedgehog video, I have one simple question I hope to ask and answer in this video. Who is Amy Rose? Is she a cheery, bright-eyed, and compassionate girl? Or is she some crazy, over-obsessed weirdo stalker? I haven't hid the fact in any of my previous Sonic-related videos that I haven't always been the biggest fan of Amy, and I've only really started to like her in recent years. So like with Shadow, in this video I'll be going over her various appearances throughout the franchise, as well as her overall character, personality, and relationships with the other members of the Sonic cast. This is going to be a far simpler character for me to dive into, and she doesn't have as deep or extensive as a story like Shadow does. So I'll mainly just be going over her character from game to game, as well as other various appearances and portrayals to see who Amy is and how, in my personal opinion, I think she should be handled in the franchise going forward. So with all that said, let's get into it, shall we?
Amy Rose made her debut in the game Sonic CD, where she really didn't have that prevalent of a role. She was introduced as Sonic's answer to Minnie Mouse, being Sonic's super cute and super obsessed fangirl. Like I said, in Sonic CD, she didn't have much of a role beyond that. Within the actual game, she only has 2 appearances, showing up to hug Sonic at the end of Palm Tree Panic, and getting kidnapped by Metal Sonic. The reason she was on Little Planet to begin with was because her tarot cards detailed that she would have a fateful encounter there. Other than that, she really didn't have much character to speak of in this game. But that would soon change in the next big release, Sonic Adventure. In this game, we get more of a deeper look at Amy's character. Her introduction in the game sees her doing some shopping and thinking back to the good old days, going on adventures with her hero Sonic the Hedgehog. And this is where they firmly establish what will be Amy's defining character trait, her love for Sonic the Hedgehog. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know this incessant, nigh-obsessive love for Sonic is an aspect of Amy's character that I'm not particularly fond of. But I will say, for Sonic Adventure, it works perfectly fine here. This is Amy's introduction to a whole new generation of gaming, and firmly establishing her love for the Blue Rat is pretty understandable. And her story in general for this game doesn't really linger on it for that long. Her story in this game is mainly helping this little birdie find their family. That, as well as evading Eggman's robots. It isn't that deep, but we do get to see another important aspect of Amy's character, her compassionate heart. She helps Eggman's robot E-102 Gamma to understand things beyond Eggman's directives, like sympathy and such, along with the little birdie, of course, which leads to him helping her escape. And even later during his fight with Sonic, she stops him before Sonic can land a finishing blow, allowing Gamma to even further go on and free the animals trapped within his other E-Series brethren. While minor, it does a great job at showing Amy's true strengths as a character, her willingness to help someone in need, even someone who could once be perceived as an enemy. And while she herself doesn't have that deep of a journey, what she does do is pretty interesting, I feel. After spending a majority of the game running away and being chased by Eggman's robot Zero, when seeing them hurt her little birdie friend, she cuts the bullshit and finally stands up to it. And after all her adventure is said and done, she learns she can do stuff on her own, and vows to make Sonic see and respect her. But by then it'll be too late, as she puts it. Her story in Sonic Adventure was simple, but very effective. It established her love for Sonic while showing off her more interesting characteristics, and playing into them very well. It's only a shame the next game didn't carry that same momentum. Amy's next big appearance, being Sonic Adventure 2, didn't really do her any favors. She was primarily treated as a nuisance for a majority of the game, where she'd occasionally get forgotten or sometimes left behind by the other characters. That bit about her making Sonic see and respect her doesn't really carry over that much. She does, of course, have one saving grace in this game, and it's of course being the catalyst to Shadow's change at the end of the story. In one last-ditch effort while everyone is aiming to stop the Ark from crashing into the planet, Amy sees this as an opportunity to reach Shadow in order to gain his help, to let him see that while there are a ton of evil and selfish people, there are also just as many good people with hopes and dreams, and she begs him to help them fulfill their wishes. This, of course, in turn jogs Shadow's memories in what Maria's wish really was. This again is a great showcase of Amy's strengths. While she didn't do that much throughout the game and honestly could have been written out with very minimal changing, this scene again showcases how her passionate and caring heart truly saved the day in the end. This game didn't do her character any favors, but it still gave us this really cool moment for her. That got removed the 2 times the game was adapted. Seriously, Sega, what the fuck? They also really start to play up her affections for Sonic more in this game. Like, more in comparison to SA1, with her coming to Prison Island to save her beloved, as well as a scene of her comedically bargaining information on Shadow for his hand in marriage. And I'm bringing this up because it's one of the scenes that brilliantly showcases another aspect of their dynamic that I have a problem with, that I'll elaborate on later, but as of right now, it's fine. A little bit of fun banter with the two, but it's not that deep just yet. The next mainline game to feature her is none other than Sonic Heroes, where we see her fawning over her hero Sonic the Hedgehog as usual. But despite what many people will say, her story in this game doesn't really focus that much on the Blue Rat. People think her motivation is that she wants to track down Sonic to force him to marry her, but her main motivation in this game is to help her friends Big, Cream, and Cheese find their little pals Froggy and Chocolachow. And for the most part, I can appreciate this story for Amy. It's the first time she's taking charge on an adventure on her own that on the surface doesn't relate to Sonic all that much, minus the few occasions they cross paths. The problem with Amy in this game, however, is despite that, 90% of the cutscenes revolving around Team Rose has her talk mainly about Sonic. Somehow, some way, her dialogue more often than not diverts back to something in relation to Sonic, despite him not even being her main motivation for going on this adventure. And this is the beginning of what I think is the problem with Amy's character. That love for Sonic, while before was pretty inoffensive, all things considered, is slowly but surely growing into becoming something that's a bit overplayed. This joke right here...
見つけたわよ、my darling!
エイミー
ソニック、今日こそ私と結婚してもらうからね
just never did anything for me. I don't find it all that cute, or charming, or endearing. It just feels like such a random thing for her to throw out there before they literally try to beat the shit out of each other. I think it'd worked better had it been presented as her briefly losing focus when she meets Sonic, before quickly gathering herself to then interrogate Team Sonic about Chocola and Froggy's whereabouts, while still trying to beat the shit out of them. It's another one of those moments that on its own is just kind of whatever, but I bring it up because it's pretty emblematic of what Amy's character is slowly turning into. The following entry, Sonic 06, doesn't focus on her as much, but still has some stuff that I want to discuss. The plot of 06 is pretty bloated, so there isn't too much Amy stuff to discuss here. She starts out, of course, looking for Sonic, but then goes out of her way to help newcomer Silver the Hedgehog find who he's looking for, neither of them being aware they're looking for the same person. And when they run into Sonic, Silver tries to kill him. She immediately jumps in to defend him so that Sonic can save Princess Elise. The scene that transpires after this has gotten shit for a while by a lot of folks, myself included, because this is the game that I think really hammered home this incessant love for Sonic and how she'll stick by it no matter what to an almost outlandish degree.
あなたが探してたのソニックだったの最初からソニックを殺すつもりで
あいつは未来を滅ぼす張本人なんだ
そんなの嘘よソニックがそんなことするわけない
本当なんだこの先の未来のどこかであいつは世界を滅ぼすだから俺は
信じないそんなのもしもそんなことになったって世界とソニックのどっちかなら私はソニックを選ぶ
Silver approaches Amy with the notion that Sonic will soon cause the end of the world. She at first reasonably thinks this isn't true, and defends her beloved Blue Rat. But the bit folks take issue with is her proclaiming that if things really came down to it, if she had to choose between the world and Sonic, it'd be the Hedgehog. It's not presented as her being in any sort of denial, or even her being confident that Sonic would just never cause that kind of destruction. It's just played completely straight. If it came down to it, she'd choose Sonic over the fate of the world. And that reasonably rubs folks the wrong way, because it just makes Amy seem way too one-note. And I need folks to realize that up to this point, and even a few games after, this little thing with her and Sonic has always been presented as being extremely one-sided. Sonic in the games hasn't reciprocated these strong feelings at any given point. So instead of it being something like her sticking solely by someone she loves, like a full-on romantic partner, it just feels like she's irrationally sticking by a very one-sided crush. Coupled with the fact that in each game they keep playing it up more and more, it really didn't get people to like her character any more than a lot of folks probably already didn't. That's not to say she doesn't have any redeeming qualities in this game. Her attitude is still pretty fun to watch, and her interactions with Silver and Elise were also pretty cute. But by this point, Amy just wasn't doing it for me. There's an argument from Amy fans that I've seen that suggests people should not have as big of an issue with Amy's stance on Sonic in this moment, because it mirrors other characters' moments in the story, like Rouge sticking by Shadow when presented with humanity turning against him, and Silver not being able to go through with sacrificing Blaze to get rid of Iblis. But these situations couldn't be any more different in my opinion. Rouge sticking by Shadow, who, while not a friend, is still someone she really cares for, when hit with the prospect of the world turning against him, hating him, and imprisoning him, she tells him she'll always stand by him to lend her aid. And the Silver situation is a little more confusing because after he says he's not able to go through with sacrificing Blaze, I guess she just goes and does it herself anyway, so it's not like him using Chaos Control to seal them away was like the only option for them. Regardless, I see these as being completely different compared to Amy being told Sonic will destroy the world instead of being confident that he wouldn't, tell Silver that if it really came down to it, she'd choose Sonic over the fate of the world. I've seen folks even suggest that if it was Tails in this moment, it wouldn't have been hated as much, which I'll be honest and say is only partially true. I'd still say Tails would get a bit of shit given how smart he is, but I don't think it'd be as severe since he is still a kid after all. Though if Tails did say the whole choose Sonic over the world thing, it'd still be pretty fucking dumb, I'm not gonna lie. The focus of this video is going to shift ever so slightly, because Amy's character doesn't change a whole lot, so before I get to the 2010s and onward, I'd want to talk about a few other things. Firstly, the whole Sun-Amy ship thing. This is less to do with ship culture and more just to do with the character's dynamic as a whole. I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, a big thing that resulted in young Darion not being fond of Amy's character is how they wrote her dynamic with Sonic. With Amy's over-obsessive antics always shown to put Sonic off, and never really be all that comfortable with, and this isn't even something in specific relation to Sonic. Time and again in fiction, when you have a set of characters where person A is overly obsessed with person B, and that's the only joke, it can very easily get pretty tiresome. Like 2012 Donatello with April, or Marinette in the first 2 seasons of Miraculous Ladybug with Adrian. I specified the first 2 seasons because those were the only ones I watched. I don't know if she gets any better beyond that point. Now on paper, there is a lot to like about these two as a couple, and I mainly mean that on a thematic level. Sonic is a character that is representative of a lot of things, freedom being one of them. Sonic is like the wind, completely free and untamed by anyone or anything. Amy Rose is a character that is very emblematic of love. All throughout the franchise, her loving and very passionate heart is something that is very apparent, and together these two things can pair off pretty well together and make them really fun to watch. And on top of that, the way Amy's written in stuff like the adventure games, where she herself doesn't change too much, but primarily helps others better themselves like Gamma or Shadow, perfectly mirrors Sonic's flat character arc, where he routinely helps people better themselves. The problem is the games rarely ever directly play into these themes in relation to the characters in favor of a dynamic that just doesn't really hold up to me. Sonic in various instances is shown being really put off by Amy's lovey-dovey shenanigans, to the point where whenever they routinely cross paths, he expresses either annoyance, discomfort, or a compulsion to run the other way.
しかし、エッグマンのやつ、何を企んでいるんだ。
ま、大したことじゃないだろうけどな。
ソニック
エミー、お前も参加してたんだな。
だってこんな面白そうな大会見逃せるわけないじゃない。それにきっとソニックに会えると思ったから。
テイルス？ソ
ニックだ。イエーイ。ソニック久しぶり。
エミー。
ちょっと何その態度。
着いたぞ。
待っていました。 異界の騎士よ。
うわ
たわけ、なぜ逃げる？
ーだってあれ。
湖の貴婦人に失礼だぞ。
Really?
頭を下げんか。
It's not presented in a fun cat and mouse chase sort of way. The nigga just doesn't like this shit. There's a misconception spurred on by Amy haters that really muddies up the discussion surrounding her, and it's that Sonic hates Amy's fucking guts, even though all of his behavior towards her throughout the games suggests otherwise. Sonic undoubtedly cares for Amy, that much is certain. Whether or not he shares the same kind of romantic interest is kind of another question. Which brings me over to this next mini subject. Does Sonic love Amy romantically? This is a question I got all the time growing up, talking to friends and cousins and stuff who didn't know much about Sonic, and I could never give them a straight answer, because the games never give a straight answer. With him always being shown to be put off by her affections, and never at any point shown expressing the same kind of feelings. Now, I ain't gonna say they gotta have Sonic go in a full romantic ballad and all that shit, but something small and simple like what Sonic X did. Now, I have a lot of problems with Sonic X. I might have a video coming for that pretty soon. Problems that correlate with Sonic and Amy for many different reasons, and if I'm being honest, this show is one of the bigger things that made me not like Amy's character, but I think I can confidently say that this scene is pretty damn good. When Sonic comes back to Mobius, and yes, I'm calling him Mobius, suck my dick, he greets Tails, defeats Eggman, but the actual first thing he does is to go and visit Amy. And we get this nice and cute scene with this real nice romantic music blaring in the background, and we get a moment where we can't hear exactly what Sonic says, at least in the Japanese version, but we can infer it's something along the lines of him professing his love to Amy. Something small and cute like that could work really well, but it's a shame the games never really did anything like that. Now, their dynamic in this show still ain't perfect, with Sonic still not often shown to be all for Amy's romance, and just generally being a bit of a dick to her some of the time. But as a whole, I think this was a pretty solid moment that the games could learn from. I saw this tweet a while ago that talked about Sonic and Amy's relationship, and suggested it should be more like that of Bugs and Lola Bunny from the Looney Tunes show, and I very much agree. Because the thing with Lola and Bugs is that at first he was very put off by her. She's a bit more loony and crazy for Bugs' more relaxed demeanor in that show, and at first he wanted nothing to do with her. But the more the show goes on, they spend a bit more time together, and we see how he worries less about changing who she is, and over time is proud enough to even call her his girlfriend. Even with all her continued batshit insane antics. And on top of that, Lola as a character is written with a lot more personality outside of her relationship and love for Bugs. I really wish they had the same approach with Sonic and Amy, where Sonic is a bit shy and put off by her overzealous expression of love, but still very much reciprocates those feelings, but in a more subtle and Sonic-y way. And as for Amy, I wish the writers would have pushed more of her other traits that don't revolve around Sonic, so as to make her feel less one-note. Something else that really hasn't done Amy any favors has been the English localization for some of the games. You might have noticed by now that I've been analyzing and showing clips of the Japanese cutscenes and translations for the games. Part of the reason why that is because the English localizations for some of these games tweak a few things that kind of affect how the character is presented. Sonic Adventure being a pretty big and notable one, as it's one of the big introductions for Amy's character. It presents Sonic as being more annoyed with Amy's presence and antics, rather than begrudgingly accepting them.
この小鳥さん追われてるの。ちょっとの間ボディーガードしてよ。ダメだって言ってもついてくわよ。
しょうがないな。
あ、待ってよ。
See, this little birdie's got in trouble. I think you should be his bodyguard a little while.
What?
Doesn't matter. We'll just tag along.
No way!
Come on, don't run away! Oh!
It's not a gigantic difference, because considering all the following games, this kind of behavior from Sonic isn't exactly that out of place, I feel. But it's a notable difference because it kind of affects how we're meant to view Amy in this game, and a few games onward. And before we jump back into the games, there's one more little thing I want to briefly discuss. There are a number of Amy fans who like to argue that the amount of disliking towards Amy isn't justified because of characters like Tails. Tails, when he was introduced, was a kid who followed Sonic because he thought he looked cool, and Sonic, being impressed that he managed to keep up with him, just let Tails tag along on his adventure. And people largely accept this, whereas Amy, a character whose core characteristic is her love for Sonic and always following him around, is often scrutinized by Sonic fans for being an over-obsessive stalker, as someone put it. And they seem to think Tails' admiration of Sonic gets more favored than Amy's love and admiration for him, because according to them, Tails doesn't get nearly as much shit for when he shows his admiration in comparison to when Amy shows her undying love for him. And I'm going to put this in the nicest way I can. You are unironically on crack if you think these instances with these two characters are remotely similar. Firstly, the key difference with Tails and Amy is that Tails' character isn't bound by being Sonic's player too. Yeah, they're best pals, but that's not Tails' defining characteristic, whereas with Amy, more often than not, she is written to want to have something to do with Sonic. No matter where or when, if she's around, it likely has something to do with finding her darling Sonic. Which, as I said earlier, can get pretty tiresome. And people act like Tails doesn't get any shit for when he's super attached or obsessed with Sonic. Except he does. There's a reason why people got bent out of shape when Tails cried out to Sonic and was super attached to classic Sonic in Forces, because by this point, he had been in several situations where Sonic had died and knew to lock the fuck in and get shit done. He had never acted like this before. And in Sonic 2, fans were also critical of 60 to 70% of Tails' dialogue being nothing but him just glazing the shit out of Sonic.
Did your butt just turn into a helicopter?
A buttcopter. Oh, only Sonic the Hedgehog could come up with something like that.
Wait, so you've been watching me this whole time? Even in the shower?
Ah, that's a trick question. Sonic the Hedgehog prefers bubble baths.
Man, you're good. Wait a second, what's that sound?
Only Sonic the Hedgehog needs rescuing this much.
And on the whole quote-unquote stalking thing, Tails literally only followed Sonic once, and it was because he was a lonely kid who thought Sonic looked cool. And I remember growing up, people online often did make little jokes about Tails being a little weirdo back then. So it's not like this little aspect of Tails' story is above being criticized by fans. But the key thing is that Sonic isn't really bothered by it. He was impressed and let Tails tag along. On the other end, however, with Amy, not only does she always do it all the time, like I've mentioned several times by now, he's routinely put off by the chasing and affection and all that shit. So obviously people are going to have more of a problem with one over the other, especially as the latter is presented as being an extremely one-sided love thing, while the former is just basic admiration from a kid. There's a lot I enjoy and respect about Amy's character around this point in time, but a lot of it is just overshadowed by her love for Sonic, and it's a little hard for me to say that I fully like her character. When I consumed all this stuff as a kid, this shit just wasn't it for me, and I really couldn't get into it. That was, however, until the 2010s rolled around, where we started to see a noticeable shift in the perception and reception of Amy Rose. And no, I'm not referring to anything having to do with the mainline games, but rather the Sonic Boom branch of the franchise. In 2014, we were blessed with a little spin-off branch of the franchise called Sonic Boom, which took the game characters as we know them and changed their designs and personalities, Amy herself having a pretty notable change-up. Enter Boom Amy, the quote, Amy Rose for people who don't like Amy Rose, as I've seen some Amy fans claim. And I'm not gonna lie, that couldn't be any more true. You wanna know how I know this? Because this was the point where I started to love Amy Rose as a character. Like I mentioned earlier, Sonic X was one of the big things that got me to not favor Amy much growing up. And it's because in an episodic show where not many of the characters grow and change that much, with Amy, what you see is very much what you get for like 80 plus episodes. Sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. This show was one of the things that really amped up her love for Sonic, where it'd take up its own subplot for several episodes, and like I've mentioned for the games up to this point, it gets really old really fast. Especially given how the two's dynamic is handled at this point in the franchise. It wasn't all bad, the two have their fair share of fun moments, like the one I mentioned earlier, but a lot of it is kind of overshrouded by the not-so-fun aspects that have plagued the games, like I keep mentioning, and it just really caused me to not like her all that much. I say this to let y'all know the stark contrast to how I view Boom Amy. Boom Amy's personality is much more derived from her other characteristics than her love for Sonic. They utilize her as being the ultra-caring, compassionate, almost mother-like figure to the rest of the cast, but still having a short trigger if you piss her off enough. And y'all have no fucking idea how refreshing this was. As a young lad who had watched Sonic X front to back numerous times growing up, Watching a Sonic show and having Amy pop up in several episodes and seeing her do different things that didn't have any relation to her love for Sonic just felt so fucking good, dude. Holy shit. And while on that, the way they handle Sonic and Amy's relationship, I also really like. They treat each other like genuine friends that both mutually have strong feelings for each other, but aren't willing to be completely open about it. They do fun couple things without exactly being a couple, and there's none of that weird one-sided over-obsessive stuff like in the games. It kind of bothers me when some fans write this Amy off as being the, quote, typical girl character, because I feel like it kind of undermines her role amongst the other cast members. Like, in a world with cynical egomaniacs, genius kid scientists, paranoid nutjobs, lovable himbos, and maniacal and lonely narcissists, Amy really does stick out by being that kind of motherly figure to some of the other cast members, trying to get them to open up and express themselves emotionally, going through different lengths and therapeutic exercises to help them out, little stuff like that, and it's cute. And it doesn't even feel that far removed from Game Amy. This Amy was such a breath of fresh air that it basically made me want Game Amy to be exactly like this. That this is the perfect blueprint to get Amy right, and I wasn't the only one who thought this. There was a very noticeable shift in how the fanbase viewed Amy around the time of Boom. People grew more favorable of her once they dropped the over-obsessive lovey-dovey antics from the games and utilized her other traits beyond that. But, the more time passed, the more I realized taking Boom Amy's personality and plopping it into the games wouldn't go as smoothly as people think. Because the world that's crafted in Boom feels tailor-made to fit this particular version of Amy. And I say that because if you were to put Boom Amy in the world of the games, where there's free-spirited adventurers, naive yet noble guardians, genius kid scientists, Tails doesn't really differ much between Boom and the main games, if we're being honest. Maniacal genius scientists, emotionally reserved loners, and morally dubious jewel thieves, etc., Boom Amy just doesn't fit as well as people would think. And that's primarily because Boom Amy is considerably more toned down in personality than Game Amy, and I don't just mean that in her love for Sonic. Game Amy is a very expressive, rowdy, bratty, and eccentric girl, and Boom Amy, while having her fair share of moments like that, don't really hold a candle to the likes of Game Amy, and hell, even Amy in Sonic X in some instances. I still love Boom Amy for what she is, but I think it's time for more people to realize using this exact kind of character, made for a very specific version of Sonic, just won't gel too well with the main game universe and the main game cast. This almost motherly figure kind of role just doesn't fit or stand out as much with the other game characters. You want to know how I know this? Because Sonic Forces and Frontiers exist. Now, I'm not saying they directly pulled Boom Amy over writing-wise for these games, but I do think they took a bit of the wrong cues as to why people liked Boom Amy. Amy in these games is significantly more toned down than in the previous ones. In her love for Sonic, which I think is for the better, but along with that, they also make her general demeanor and attitude a lot more subdued as well. Like I mentioned earlier, Amy has a lot of personality, and unfortunately, it seems like Sega took some of the wrong cues from what folks liked about Boom Amy. Rather than accentuate her other traits like her caring nature and passionate heart, they scaled everything back and just called it a day. There's no fire, no energy, no passion, and what we have in these games is just so dull compared to what we used to have, even if I still don't think it was all that good to begin with. There's a way you can have both. There's a way you can have Amy with her love for Sonic, but dialed back enough to where it doesn't make up a majority of her personality, and still write her with her bubbly, energetic, and fiery self. You want to know how I know this? Because the IDW comics and Murder of Sonic exist. The IDW comics have been going on for a good while now, and it's here where I think we get one of the better versions of Amy, because she's unapologetic about her love for Sonic, but it doesn't take up so much of her personality. And she consistently has so much energy and fire like I mentioned earlier. But I will clarify, the best amount of Amy content we get is under writer Evan Stanley. The main IDW book flips between the longtime comic writer Ian Flynn and Evan Stanley, and the latter is where we get consistently more bubbly, lovey, and energetic Amy. That's not to say Flynn's Amy doesn't have her fair share of fun moments, but a majority of them are more subdued compared to when Stanley is writing her. And I won't say Stanley's writing for her is perfect either. There are occasional moments where she skirts back a bit too much into the old Amy writing style. Just once or twice that puts me off a tad and doesn't line up 100% with her behavior earlier on in the comic. But I think it's these two writers jumping on and off the comic once in a while and providing slightly different takes on this character really work to make it feel more balanced out in my opinion. But when it comes to Murder of Sonic, that's when we get into the really good shit. Murder of Sonic is a visual novel game Sonic Team cooked up as an April Fool's celebration. I unironically believe Murder of Sonic has the best portrayal of Amy to date, because she has that energy, she has her attitude, she has her lively personality, she has her love for Sonic, but her personality doesn't revolve so much around that. The game takes place on Amy's birthday, and she really is the star of the show in that game for me. If there's any blueprint for future writers to take from, I'd suggest it's this. So where does that leave us now? Well, like with my Shadow video, the next big outing to feature Amy that we have to look forward to is the next Sonic film. Amy's role in the games doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon, but with that, we still have a few snags in how her character is written. As I briefly mentioned in my Sonic X Shadow video, which you guys should totally watch by the way, I mentioned how they tweaked some characters' bios, notably Amy's, and in it, they almost completely nix her love for Sonic, which on the surface ain't too big of a deal, but considering these are meant to accurately portray and reflect the characters and their personalities for new players, it feels a bit odd to leave something out like that. And maybe I'm jumping the gun on this, but it almost feels like they're moving away from Amy being in love with Sonic entirely, which just feels odd. It feels like Sega is just doing their typical Sega thing and are overcorrecting on people's issues with Amy. I don't need Amy's love for Sonic to be completely removed, just dialed back a bit. Again, stuff like Boom and Murder of Sonic, the latter more than the former if we're being honest, did a great job at having Amy be a really fun character whose personality wasn't driven so much by her love for the Blue Rat. So right now, I really don't know what the future holds for Amy exactly. In the movie, I hope they don't pull a Princess Peach and just make her a more serious and strong warrior type, and let Amy have her more charming and bubbly characteristics. And if she's gonna have her love for Sonic, I hope they take some cues from Murder of Sonic on that end, where she's unapologetic about her affections, but it doesn't drive and dictate too much of her overall personality.
So now is where we ask ourselves, who is Amy Rose? Amy Rose is a young, energetic, and passionate girl who is unapologetic about her affections and confidently wears her heart on her sleeves, but has been written to a point where those affections for one Sonic the Hedgehog have resulted in her overall character feeling extremely one-note. There's been a few writing attempts to subdue that love, but it oftentimes results in the writers forgetting about the other traits that makes Amy's personality fun to watch. I'm enjoying some of the recent Amy stuff that we've been getting, but I can still confidently say it's not exactly perfect. Evan Stanley and Ian Flynn, I think, have a pretty good handle on her in the IDW comics, where she has her love for Sonic, but it's not such a dominating factor of her overall personality. But she still has some of that high energy and passion that makes her fun to watch. Because of stuff like Sonic X Shadow Gens, it's a little hard to tell what direction they're going to take Amy in regards to her love for Sonic. Again, I don't think it's something that needs to be completely removed, but just a bit more subdued, again, like that of Boom or Murder of Sonic. I'm sorry if this vid felt a bit messier in comparison to my Shadow video. Amy's character throughout the series isn't as airtight, I guess I want to say. That's probably the most incorrect term I could have used. She doesn't have a super complex story like that of Shadow, so a lot of this video was just me going over her personality, the flaws with it, and how I think it could kind of be improved for the future. So with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also be sure to like and subscribe. This has been Darion GNB, and take care.